All right, there we go. Go ahead, Laura.
Welcome everyone to our December 11th, 2020 WSU Food Systems Hub call. My name is Laura Lewis. I'm director of the WSU Food Systems program, and we are joined this morning by Nicole Witham, our statewide coordinator, Abba Kaiser, our project manager, and Tia Taylor, our office coordinator. We're excited to be here today and welcome our guests from the Northwest Portland Indian Health Board. I found this beautiful image on their website this week, and it looks like it's part of a mural. So I just wanted to share it with all of you. You can see it on their website as well. So just an overview of this morning's meeting. So we're going to just go over what the WSU Food Systems Hub is. We have several announcements just rolling over from last week with some updates. And then we are so excited to welcome Dr. Victoria Warren Mears, Director of the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center, and Nora Frank Buckner, the Weave Northwest Project Coordinator, both from the Northwest Portland Indian Health Board, and just to learn more about both NWTEC and the Northwest Tribal Food Sovereignty Coalition. So welcome to our hub meeting today. Again, really excited to hear about these programs, and then we'll have time to share at the end of our speaker presentations. So just want to welcome all of you again. Please introduce yourself in the Zoom chat box. Let us know who you are, where you're located, and what you do. Please also use this chat box to ask us questions, share links, resources for the group, bring up any topics that you want to discuss at the end of the call or you think would be good for future meetings as well. So a little bit about the WSU Food Systems program. We evolved out of the small farms team. We've been around for about 20 years in the state of Washington, but we've been called the Food Systems program for about the last 3.5. We seek to work with communities throughout the state to foster viable farm businesses, optimize sustainable natural resource stewardship, and to promote scaled processing and distribution, always in the pursuit of access to healthy food for all. You can see our 7 topic areas on the right here. And those are also part of our hub. So I'll show that to you in a minute. We are located across the state at all 40 extension offices as WSU faculty and staff, many of which are affiliated with our food systems program. And you can see here just the network of WSU across the state between our campuses, our research and extension centers, other centers like the Metro Center, and our extension offices. So a little bit about the WSU Food Systems Hub. We've updated our hub wheel with our 7 focus areas, and we still have the Washington Food and Farm Finder link there as well. You can find that on our website. The purpose of the hub is to create a space to connect regularly with our WSU folks, as well as external partners working across the state to support the Washington food system and really across the Pacific Northwest. We are still collecting and updating resources related to COVID-19, and you can find those on our hub as well, or our website, and also to provide space and time to share stories and support. So the hub is composed of both our website as well as these calls, our YouTube channel, which also it curates these calls live that are recorded live, but they will be there for further viewing. We have our calendar of events on our website. Please send us any events that you want to have listed here. It's a great resource to look at what's happening across Washington and the Washington food system. And I want to turn it over to Nicole Witham. We did announce this last week, but it just an update again to let people know that this is live now, our Farm Walk website.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And you can hear me. I'm in full podcast audio for you this morning. So we launched our Farm Walks website, which basically grew out of the effort to create a Farm Walks podcast this year in lieu of our on-farm farm walks. Normally, farm walks happen on farm throughout the state at different, unique, sustainable, organic, biodiverse farm and food businesses. And since we couldn't get out there face to face, we chose to pivot to a podcast. And we've recorded 3 episodes so far that are now going through post production and will be airing soon. Kate Smith was our first host with a completely Spanish speaking episode with Pablo Silva of Silva Family Farms. And then we just did 2 episodes this week with Boisfort Valley Farm with Mike and Heidi Peroni, and BCS Livestock with Casey Smith. So we're really excited. We have more episode interviews coming up. We ask if you're interested in connecting with the farmers that we are interviewing to hop on over to the Ask a Farmer page, and you can fill out questions and comments and different things for them there that we can share throughout our interview. So yeah, this is a really exciting. We have the upcoming interviews that we have are with Bill from Sky Island Farm, Ryan from Steel Wheel Farm, and Emily from Local Color, Local Fiber. I might be messing that up. Might be messing the name of that one up, but anyways, check out the website, do a couple Ask a Farmers, stay engaged, and episodes will be airing this winter.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And then I don't know if Cheryl Weiser is on the call today, but I've been putting a plug about this Eat Local First, the Washington Food and Farm Finder, and she's been our guru around marketing and branding. So if she's on the call, I'm going to let her pop in and say anything she wants. Otherwise, I'm just going to encourage all of you to go and see this fabulous new resource to find food and farm businesses in Washington State. Okay, I don't want to put Cheryl on the spot if she's in, especially if she's not here. So this is a great resource. It's being co-hosted, or it's a collaborative effort among several organizations in the state where we've combined our pre-existing farm guides and resources into one resource. So I just want to encourage you to visit this. There's also a great holiday campaign going on right now where you can win some really incredible gifts. So please visit the website. And if you have any questions, reach out to us and we can put you in touch with the right folks. Just a couple plugs too for some questionnaires and surveys that have come out. So the WA Food 2 survey is live. This was the survey that looked at food security pre-COVID and during COVID. We just launched another survey to follow up and see what is happening across Washington in terms of access to food benefits, and food security. So I please encourage anyone to take this. Any of you can take this survey. It's for anyone in Washington 18 and over. So please push out to your networks. We had 2,600 respondents the last go around in June and July, and we're hoping to get a similar number this time around as well. And not to be confused with the WA Food 2 survey is the WA Farm COVID-19 survey, which is a follow-up to the economic impact survey that was done earlier in the year with the WSDA. So this is a survey that's open to all producers in Washington. And please forward this out. There's a great blog post that we forwarded out today or this week as well from the WSDA. So this is a really important survey to understand economic impact to producers across Washington state. If you need any more information about either of these, please reach out to me and I can put you in touch with the right people. And then last but not least is just a reminder that if you are working with any of the producers and processors across the state that received some of the COVID, the CARES Act rapid response grant funds, and they need technical assistance in terms of implementing those funds, please reach out to the WA meetup at wsu.edu for assistance. And Nicole is managing that intake and answering several questions, as well as putting folks in touch with others at WSU like Paul Kuber, Sarah Smith, and so forth, so that you can successfully expend those funds and be able to support your operations in the coming weeks as you deal with those contract requirements. So we are here today to welcome again the Northwest Portland Indian Health Board, Director of the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center, Victoria, and the Weave Northwest Project Coordinator, Nora. Welcome again to the Hub, Nora. I know you've been here in the past, and it's such a delight to have you here today, Victoria. I know there's several folks on the call that have been looking forward to hearing from both of you. And I just want to put a shout out on our steering committee meeting earlier this week. Lizanne mentioned she's one of our steering committee members, a great connection with you as well. So really excited to have you here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so Nora and I can share our slides. I am thrilled, truly, and honored to be here with you all today. And it's my privilege really to come to you speaking on behalf of the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center at the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. And yes, I was very excited to see some of the names on this call. And yes, Lizanne and I go back a tremendous amount of time, probably more than either one of us really wants to talk about at this point. But as you may have noticed in my introduction in the chat box, I am an alumni of WSU and I pulled out my WSU gear today. I also am thrilled that the food surveys to see the logos of actually both of my universities that I attended. I also went to the University of Washington. So I am a Coug and a Husky both, which is a little odd, but definitely my heart is definitely back in the Palouse for sure. And I spent a good number of years there. So thank you so much for inviting us today. And I'm just going to give you an overview of our organization for those of you who might not be familiar with it. And then I'll pitch it over to Nora to really give us a cutting edge update of the food sovereignty work that the board is doing in partnership with the tribes in the Northwest. And so we're both very thrilled to be here. So I would like to just give you an overview of our organization very briefly and direct you to our program directory. And I see that you took a shot of our website, so you are familiar with where that is, but this is our building, which you might surmise that none of us are occupying right now. My office is not looking the same way my office right now does, probably the same for most of you as well. But our office is located in Portland, Oregon, and we serve the 43 federally recognized tribes of the states of Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Our organization was formed in 1972. It's a tribal organization and a nonprofit both. Our designation as a tribal organization comes from the fact that we report to a board of directors, which is made up of a single representative from each of the 43 tribes in the states we serve. And the tribes are members of our organization by virtue of a charter membership. So we have 43 bosses and we work for 43 distinct nations. And that group funnels up to an executive board of 5. Made up of a chair, co-chair, secretary, treasurer, and sergeant at arms. And those are representatives from all of our tribes. Our current chairman is Nicholas Lewis, who's from the Lummi Nation. And our vice chairman is Cheryl Kennedy, who's from the Grand Ronde tribe. And so we are thrilled to report to them. They control our work and are our bosses and are in fact the board that we speak of. We have an executive director, Laura Platero, who's been with us since January. So she had the honor of taking over at a very awkward time at best, since we all left our building in March and have been working at home since. So we've been learning our new executive director's style and continuing forward with our good work from a remote distance. So the purpose that the board was established for was really for healthcare advocacy for the tribes in the Northwest. And it came around and was generated out of a meeting that was of the service areas for Indian Health Service. And so that was the start of the board. And as the tribes took over their own healthcare work, the board continued to grow and expand, and membership changed to represent each of the tribes. So the way it works now is each tribe has a vote in our program of work that we do. We have a strategic initiative that we take care of. We have a plan that we update each 5 years that directs our intentions as a board and our overall mission and vision. And then from there, each of the awards and work that we take on in the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center and for the board as a whole is approved through tribal resolution. So every initiative that we undertake is passed to our board for their approval, and we don't go off on directions or tangents that they don't approve of. So all of those are approved by our board. And so the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center is one of the parts of the board, and we use that terminology as a departmental designation more than just a single program. There are 12 tribal epidemiology centers throughout the United States, and the program as a grant program from Indian Health Service began in 1996 with initial funding coming out in 97. Our epicenter at the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board was one of the first 4. So we've been around for quite some time, and we will brag that it was our leaders that were the reason that we have an epicenter. And so each of the 4 originals brag that same way, but definitely the advocacy of the Northwest leaders is a great reason why we have the tribal epidemiology centers. And each of the TECs functions independently. So if you've seen one of us, you've literally seen one of us, because we're all set up differently. But we are also part of a national consortium of TECs, which we call the TEC-C. It's not a formal organization, but it is how we meet together as directors to work initiatives. So for example, since about April, we've all been working collectively on responses and advocacy work for data around COVID-19. And so we've made some great strides in data access over the last 9 months or so. So we do function together in that way. Here's a map of where we're all located. And so the first thing you'll probably notice on our map, and this map stars for Northwest in California because it was resurrected from a presentation from that, which I just noticed, so my apologies on that. The Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center, as I mentioned, serves Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And we're in the Portland area of IHS, which sometimes lends a bit of confusion to our title because people say, well, then don't you just serve Portland? And the answer to that is no. All the centers are named for the IHS area which they're represented. So each area for Indian Health Service has an epidemiology center, with a notable exception, and that's the Intertribal Council of Arizona serves the Phoenix area and the Tucson area. The Navajo Nation has their own tribal epidemiology center because they're a large nation. And then there's also the Urban Indian Health Institute, which some of you may be familiar with, which is located in Seattle, Washington. UIHI serves the urban Indian health programs throughout the United States. So their service is bound by large geographic counties in the United States, whereas for the remaining centers, we're either an Indian Health Service area or in one case specific to a tribe. So we are public health authorities, and I like to use every opportunity to throw that out there just to mention it. Through the Affordable Care Act and the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, which you may or may not realize was an addendum to the Affordable Care Act, each epicenter is granted access to the use of HHS data. So any data that is under the purview of the Secretary of HHS, the epicenters are to have access to that data so we can do the work that we do for the tribes in our respective service areas. So you may or may not have heard, because I would say it's a minor blip on the news front, but during COVID-19, there was a blip on the news front if you follow American Indian Alaska Native news at all, and that was that we were having some challenges getting COVID-19 data across the nation. And so there was actually some access that was granted to us from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to their Decipher system, which is where the COVID reporting was going at that time. We also, as tribal epicenters, have access to HHS Connect, which gives us access to data from hospitals, COVID testing. Ultimately, we'll have COVID vaccination data for American Indian Alaska Native people in our region as well. So also, Center for Disease Control and Prevention must provide us with technical assistance, and that is a two-way street because we are communicating with them about the needs of our tribes as well as they're communicating with us regarding data quality and things like that. And so, as I mentioned, our epicenter was formed in 1996. It was formed before the national legislation, and it was formed as a research and epidemiology center. It's housed within the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board and guided by a public health committee, which is made up of our delegation. And at this point, which changes minute by minute, we have a staff of about 55 people working on a variety of public health programs. Our Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country project, which we call WEAVE, is an integral component of our work that we do, and our Food Sovereignty Initiative falls underneath that program. So the core functions that we are to do as an epicenter, not our epi and research mission necessarily, but the epicenter portion, which is the Indian Health Service funding that binds us with the national epidemiology centers, is we are to collect data, evaluate data and programs, identify with the assistance of our tribes their health priorities, make recommendations for enhancement of health services, make recommendations for improvements of the healthcare delivery system in Indian country, so the IHS, urban and tribal systems that exist, and then provide epidemiologic technical assistance to tribes and other entities that request it from us, and also provide disease surveillance for the tribes. We have projects at our center that cover a variety of topics, everything from diabetes prevention, cancer prevention. I mentioned we have data projects, HIV/AIDS prevention. We also have a very robust clinical echo series, which covers hepatitis, COVID, HIV/AIDS, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit training, and diabetes, and many, many other topics, including behavioral health topics. So we have a very broad public health portfolio at our epicenter. And so, as I said, when you've seen one, you've seen one. But since we're in your region, you're likely to interface with us more often than any of the others. So just wanted to give you that overview. So I will pitch it over to Nora now to talk about the WEAVE project and the Tribal Food Sovereignty Coalition. And again, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you,
Great.
Victoria.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. Hello, everybody. I am Nora Frank Buckner. I am a Nez Perce tribal member and also a Klamath tribal descendant. I grew up down in Klamath Falls, Oregon, so southern central Oregon. I've been in the Portland area since 2011-ish, somewhere around there. And I've worked for the health board since the beginning of the WEAVE Northwest project, so since 2015. And I just want to give a shout out. I see some folks that I work really closely with on this program on this call. So hi, Lisa. Hi, Mac from Jamestown. They are the traditional foods program gurus there, and they're awesome. And also I see Michelle Week on the call, and I just got to meet her last week at one of our trainings, and she owns the Good Rain Farm, and she's out of Portland, Oregon. So hi, Michelle. So for Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country Initiative, we call that Weave Northwest at the Health Board, but that was a cooperative agreement that came out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention 5-6 years ago now. And that focus on that particular agreement was to focus on chronic disease prevention through upstream public health approaches. So I know that many of you are familiar with the policy systems and environmental change, PSE jargon lingo that the public health field uses. And so we were doing programs with tribes, providing subawards to them to start working on projects to prevent some of the diseases that we're seeing, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke. We did some tobacco cessation and tobacco prevention work. But what really started to pop up most often with our tribal subawardees was the focus around food systems change. And that makes sense because when we're talking about some of these big chronic diseases that we see, a lot of it has to do with the food that we're eating. And our tribes were wanting to take control of their local food system and provide healthy food for their communities. And so that meant a lot of them were working on things like building a community garden, adding traditional foods into the garden, or perhaps building up their traditional food program. Or it meant they were writing curriculum to use within the garden or their traditional foods programs. So there was a wide spectrum of what our tribes were working on in regards to food systems. And then what ended up happening was a lot of the tribes that were just starting out, say they never had a community garden, or it's been fallow for so long that it felt like they were starting over again. They were reaching out to us and to the other tribes who were a little bit further along. Maybe they've had an established community garden and then they were ready to write curriculum, or they were ready to expand their garden, or what have you. They wanted more intertribal collaboration, more opportunities to share resources, to share knowledge, and not have to recreate the wheel, and see what was working within the tribal communities throughout the area. And so that really is where this Northwest Tribal Food Sovereignty Coalition came out of, in the food sovereignty initiatives projects that we see. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I don't think I can. Thank you. So I think it was back in 2018 is when we really formalized our coalition. We did some strategic planning. We began to do annual gatherings, and that's where we really had the awesome opportunity. And Lisa and Mac, I think, have been involved in all of them, if I remember correctly, and where we share resources, we do some hands-on trainings, we do presentations, but most importantly, we share food and traditional food. And so whatever, whichever tribe that we host these gatherings, it's really awesome because we put the food into their hands and say, whatever you want to provide is great, and we are here to support. And usually they just, we're tribal people and we love food, and that's how we share our stories. And so the food is always so good, and I'm very sad that we didn't get to do that this year because of COVID. And an online gathering just won't cut it. So I'm hoping next year we can do a COVID-19 will be in the past and we can do a annual gathering, but we will see. Some other things that came out of that first early stages of coalition building was a media work group, and they worked on some things around traditional food messaging onto posters, and we were able to get those all done. It took a little bit longer, so we didn't actually finish and print the posters until March of this year. And so they arrived at our office, and then our office closed because of COVID. So they're still there, and I think we're gonna work on trying to mail those out within the next, few months, but it's just been really difficult to get that out. But they're absolutely beautiful, and we partnered with the Swinomish Indian tribal community to provide the recipes and the beautiful images that we used while they prepared the meals for each poster. We also do a lot of training. So some of the trainings that we've done are around things like the food sovereignty assessment tool, which helps communities do some baseline data gathering around food sovereignty in their community, what types of programs the community would like to see, or what types of food they want to see. It's a really awesome tool because then it gives some direction for the tribe to focus in on what particular projects are needed and are most actionable right away, and then they can continue to build on that. Other trainings that we've done most recently were through some funds we received from the Native American Agriculture Fund, and I don't know if Valerie is on the call, but she was going to try and hop on. But she's the Northwest Regional Director for NAF. She was with me the last time I spoke to this group back in June. So if you're on that call, you know about it. But most recently, we were able to provide a food sovereignty overview alongside business assistance and financing. So for Native food producers that maybe want to start their own business or think about going into market with their food, we were able to provide some training around that. And of course, we do other trainings around and technical assistance as needed. I often do strategic planning with tribal communities. I've helped, is Colette? Well, Colette develops out of University of Idaho. I've worked with her with my own tribe for our own food coalition. So we helped get that up and running. So we do things around that. And also through the Native American Agriculture Fund, we were able to receive some COVID-19 rapid response funds, which we've partnered with Flower Hill Institute out of New Mexico, but they serve tribal communities across the nation. And we were building or working with them to help develop a model of what could happen if a consortium of tribes wanted to purchase a farm and then use that farm to distribute food throughout the region. What would that look like? What would be the best distribution routes, things like that. So that's still in progress. And then let's see. Yeah. So that's a lot going on. And then through ATNI, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with ATNI, but that's the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. It's also a consortium of tribes throughout, like Northern California, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Montana, and parts of Alaska that come together throughout, I think, 3 different meetings throughout the year. And there's committees that span all different sectors. So we have the health board participates in the health committee, for example. I participate in the food sovereignty subcommittee that falls under natural resources. And then they have education committee, transportation committee, you name it, they probably have a committee for it. And what it does is it helps the region come up with policy platforms in their respective areas. And the food sovereignty subcommittee is very new. We've only been around for about a year, but it really came out of the Northwest Tribal Food Sovereignty Coalition, because as we continue to do more strategic planning and have more meetings, more and more conversation pops up of policy at not only at the local and tribal level, but state and federal levels. And so food sovereignty work isn't siloed in any one particular field. It's not just food systems work. It's not just health or public health lens. It's not just natural resources. And so it's spanning across several different sectors. And so we really saw the need to have a subcommittee of its very own so that we can compile some of these policy platforms and have tribes begin voting on resolutions that we can then take to the national level, which the next level would be the National Congress of American Indians. And so it's still new and we're still building up that platform, but COVID really just, I think, lit the fire for this policy work. And I'm really excited to see what's to come from that. And then most recently, we are able to partner with UW and WSU for the WA Food Survey, but with a tribal adaptation. So we're working closely with them. Currently, we're doing some qualitative interviews with our tribal leaders who work in food sovereignty throughout the state. And they are helping us to adapt the WA Food Survey so that we can deploy it within our tribal communities and see what resources and needs that they have that are particular to Indian country, so that we can use that data, so that they can use that data and information and advocate for what resources are needed as we continue to work through the pandemic or future disturbances in our food system. And I don't know if I have anything else on this slide to talk about. Victoria, did you have anything that you would like to add on any of that front? You're on mute.
Hit the wrong button there.
Okay.
No, I think that's fabulous. You've done a great job of talking about all of that, Nora, and let me get your slides back up. I do apologize for that. I hit the wrong.
Okay.
This is Zoom at its best today. It must be a Friday, right?
It's so a Friday.
That's all I can say about Zoom today. All right, I'll get right back to you there. There we go.
Yeah, I think the last slide was just our contact information, but we can leave that up for you. Oops, I didn't leave your email. Apologies for that. But maybe you can put it into the chat or something. But at this point, I think we're happy to field any questions you may have. The Food Sovereignty Initiatives project that we have is really grown a lot over the last even just 2 years. And so there's a lot there we could talk about. I will say in the most recent strategic planning series that we did virtually this fall is that tribes are really looking for deeper relationship building, deeper partnerships with agencies such as soil, water, and conservation districts, and also organizations like land trusts. Like, these are some of the things they really are looking for deeper relationships with, and to help put that Indigenous lens at the forefront of that work. So I just want to put that out there if that's helpful. But yeah, happy to field any questions or discussion.
Thank you so much, Victoria and Nora. And please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can pop it into the chat box. I'll get us started because I have a couple questions, but I have one in particular about these 12 techs. And I know you said that when you visit one, you've visited one. And I'm wondering how the other techs also support food sovereignty work, or if this is fairly unique in the Pacific Northwest in terms of what you're all doing.
Well, I think, and Nora, you can broaden the discussion some if you have other information beyond what I have. Some of the texts do have some work related to food sovereignty, and some of the parent organizations may have work related to food sovereignty that's outside of the Tribal Epidemiology Center. For example, in Alaska, there's been a tremendous amount of work done regarding sustainable food systems and food sovereignty. So not every epidemiology center will have that because it isn't part of our core work that is funded by Indian Health Service, nor is it part of some funding that we've received from CDC, which is called Strengthening Public Health Infrastructure for the Tribal Epicenters. And those are the two primary grants that we share amongst all of us, and none of that incorporates food sovereignty. However, most of the parent organizations that house the techs also have the Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country grant. And so everyone is doing their own twists on that, but there may be some additional food sovereignty work that's being undertaken. And I do know that California has their Good Health and Wellness project is called Acorns, and they were doing some food sovereignty work there as well. So I would welcome any additional input Nora might have on that.
Yeah, I think you answered that accurately. I know that some of through Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country, they've across the board, I think, have seen similar work around food systems. And we have a lot of leaders here in the Northwest that are very hands-on in this work. I don't think that's anything really new. It is just what the Northwest is all about. But yes, we do look up to programs out of Alaska, and Northern California is very progressive in their food sovereignty and policy work as well. But no, yeah, I think it just depends on the tech center, like Victoria said, or the parent organization.
Thank you. Other questions that we have? I see one in the chat box.
Sure, so I'll read for you, Nora. So this is from Cassandra Nicholas, and she said, given that so many Native Americans live in urban settings, any resources or examples related to food sovereignty work in urban communities and organizations?
Yes, just to speak on the Portland area, there's been a lot of food sovereignty work among different Native organizations. We help out as much as possible and partner as much as possible with our urban organizations here. And so, for example, through COVID-19, they've been providing food distribution to the community, but also adding virtual classes. So they'll deliver some traditional medicines or traditional foods, and then host an online Facebook Live class of how to prepare these foods or how to prepare this particular tea or, fire cider, which is, made of apple cider vinegar, different things. And so there's a lot of that work happening and being mobilized. And there are some really awesome indigenous gardens and farms that are throughout the Portland metro area. Michelle might even be able, I won't put her on the spot, but Michelle Leek, if you have anything to add, please just hop in. And these farms that are connecting with our Native organizations and providing food for their distribution, or places for our urban natives to go and gather, obviously right now in a safe manner. But yes, there's a lot of programs. And to speak to Washington, Seattle has a lot of programs that run through the Urban Indian Health Institute and Seattle Indian Health Board that they partner, I forget the name of the other organization, but they're doing similar work, particularly around some of this traditional foods and medicines during COVID-19. And they have a lot of working relationships with tribes in the Puget Sound around food sovereignty. Like they'll help with some evaluation work, much like we would provide as well. But some of them, being in the Puget Sound, just have a close relationship with some of their evaluators. And so it just, it works however it's supposed to work, especially if it's an urban project. Then UIHI usually takes that on. I didn't know if Victoria, you had more to add about like UIHI in particular.
Yeah, it's an interesting to wrap your head around the difference between the two organizations, given that we're both geographically relatively closely located. But UIHI works with the urban programs. So in Washington, that would be Spokane Native and Seattle Indian Health Board. And then, you know, when it comes to Portland, which is it's always more awkward than anything else because they're in Seattle. But when it comes to working in Portland, we occasionally will do things with urban partners if the Oregon tribes are supportive of that. But our two organizations were set apart with very different missions from the beginning. And so our organization was definitely set up to serve primarily tribes. So we do try to stay in our lane, so to speak, and not branch out. And it is a little bit even more so confusing because I know probably most of you on here have a little bit different view of my current view of urban. So when we're talking urban Indian programs, not necessarily urban counties, which is super confusing. So for example, in Washington State, we have a tremendous number of our tribes that are located in what would be from a conventional definition perspective in urban areas. So for example, the Puyallup tribe, the Muckleshoot tribe, obviously are in urban areas, along with many others. But we provide services to them by virtue of them being federally recognized tribes. And UIHI is doing the urban Indian programs specifically. So it's very confusing. And I wish I had a very easy way to explain it that was intelligible to everyone, but it has to do with the urban health, the Indian healthcare system more than it has to do with geographical designations of urban versus rural.
Sorry to muddy up the waters, everyone.
We have it here too. I see that Michelle is on the call, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Michelle. I know that Nora invited you to speak up if you want. And then we also had Kelly ask to hear more about native-led farms. And I think there's others on the call that would love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, so most, the ones I know, well, I know Michelle, you're working on your farm. Again, please feel free to hop in. And then I know out in Portland, Sauvie Island, there's a BIPOC-led farm that I think the Black Food Sovereignty Coalition actually took on and invites, you know, anyone to come out and help with whatever they want, volunteer work. And then they distribute food. And then there's one out of, hold on, my dog's being a head. Okay. There's one out of near Bend, Oregon called Sakari Farm. And I think her farm is a really nice model. She's a small farm, not a lot of produce, but
a moment. Can you give me a chance sometime today or?
Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry, someone was unmuted. Really small farm, but she, I think she goes to farmers markets and she has an online store that she sells some of her traditional teas. Most recently, I purchased a bunch of sweetgrass from her, but that was for tribal community only. So she kind of has two businesses, one where she can sell to tribal communities and kind of have that relationship with the tribes. And then she has more of her broader product that she sells, whether that's at a farmer's market or just, you know, come to her farm and pick it up, I believe, or online delivery type work. And then I don't know a lot of if there's a lot of farms, and maybe Lisa or Mac, if you know of any native-led farms in the Washington State area. That's something I don't have a lot of information on at the moment.
Go ahead.
Since inviting, I know of a decent amount of farms. I have a growing list on one of my blogs from November or so, of all the native farms and the native businesses in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I see Long Herring Farm. Beth is definitely a dear friend of mine. Spring is awesome over at Sakari. There's Little Sun Farm out at the same farm incubator, Headwaters Incubators that I'm at, that Raiden runs. I'm always excited to hear more and learn more about what's going on. We kind of, I think my better understanding of a lot of our individual farm businesses is most of them are off reservation. Most of them are trying to survive at capitalism and run a profitable business. And a lot of us are focusing on food sovereignty in some form. And that might be training indigenous youth to farm. I know that that's what happens out at Long Herring Farm. There's a lot more involvement with the university up there. And then I and a few others kind of focus on growing indigenous foods and first foods. And I saw someone mention something about preservation of the traditional foods. And that's so important. I would say that learning about my ancestors' foods, our traditional foods, our first foods, has really brought me back to the community and really strengthened my I guess I could say identity, but like really brought me back to the culture, has encouraged me to learn my language, has encouraged me to learn other traditions, beadwork, and all these other parts that stem from just simply food. Food is so much a part of culture that preserving it and sharing it and learning those stories has a profound impact on my ability to connect and strengthen and also like just the messages I get on my social media from other indigenous people have been like, they make all that work so worth it. Just hear that other people are feeling connected, feeling seen, and learning things as well is just so amazing. So it's so important. Food is such a linchpin to a lot of this work. So yeah, but yeah, there's a growing and lots of indigenous farmers in the area. It's really exciting for sure.
I would definitely agree with all of that, Michelle. And there's a lot of gardens out there that aren't necessarily, like Michelle was saying, not really there for profit. It's there for community. And that's kind of the duality of it, is a lot of, as tribal people, we want to feed the people and want them to be healthy. And that doesn't necessarily translate well when you start talking about capitalism and doing it for profit. But there's a way to do it in the right way. And I think tribes and Native people are figuring out what that looks like for them and how they can make it work for them, because there's absolutely a way to do it in the right way that makes it feel good and feeds the community. So thank you for sharing, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like we need to have you on one of our hub calls in the future, just talking about some of the things that you brought up. I know Clea Rome wanted to ask a question. I wanted to let her jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Thank you so much for this really awesome presentation. This is just such exciting work. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question on a comment, Nora, that you made, which is that the coalition is really interested and eager to expand partnerships with local land trusts and with conservation districts. And to that end, I would ask you, you know, so many of us on this call from Extension work locally with tribes in our areas and partner on food access work. And I would ask you, how can we, through our extension work that we are doing in our communities, with our partners, with our tribal partners, but even beyond that, with other partners. I see David Bobanek, you're on the call, and I know that you do such great farm to food bank work, and some of that is directly with tribal food banks. I would ask you, how do you have any advice for us as extension professionals, how we can better partner or better serve or better support this tribal food sovereignty work? Thanks.
I really appreciate that question and comments. I have to say, I often hear amazing things about Washington State Extension from our tribal partners, which isn't always the case throughout, throughout the U.S., right? There's not always that good relationship. But I know for a lot of the communities here in Washington, they really appreciate the help that Extension can offer as far as some of those preservation classes and the master gardener help, especially when they're starting a new garden and perhaps the person who's been slated to take on the garden project sometimes isn't even a gardener. So they're just, a little scared of like, well, I don't even know where to begin. And so I often ask if, reaching out to their extension would work for them. And oftentimes it does. And so I know they appreciate that. And I think to support this food sovereignty work even further, so for an example, another extension in a different state, I'm not even gonna call it out, but they do a lot of recipe development. And there's a entire, I don't know if it's a social media campaign or more of like a social network campaign, but there's a lot of recipes that are involved in this campaign. And so, of course, we have a lot of the dietary things we need to keep in consideration, along with some SNAP eligibility criteria I know you need to keep in consideration when developing these recipes, but a lot of these recipes don't really translate to Native people, and they're just like, well, I would not eat that. And so having some more representation within programs like that, or even just being able to take the lead on some of that work, I know is something that's always appreciated. So if you do work in a tribal community with your extension, I would just urge that the programming and the curriculum that's used is tribally adapted. And by that, I mean the tribe that you're working with should actually be the ones adapting it. And or if you want, train them to use that curriculum and then let them lead the classes or whatever, which I'm sure a lot of you do if you work in extension already, especially in Washington. Yeah, that's probably what I would say. Victoria, did you have anything to add, or Michelle, or Lisa, or Mac?
Well, the only thing that I would add, and I may be able to speak to this in some way as being a non-Native person who's had the honor of working in Indian country in the Northwest for 14 years. It's extremely important to have a willingness and openness to let go of whatever your personal agenda is. And just realize that no matter how much expertise you come with to a community, you will not be expert in a culture other than your own. And so I think just really using the concept of cultural humility and knowing what you bring to the table and what your expertise might be, but then really be willing to listen to what the community's needs are, because those two things can be so disconnected. And I think historically the reason for a lot of distrust and poor communication across entities is just simply that lack of a common space for understanding, and that the lack of willingness to learn from other people. And so I still remember one of the questions that I was asked in my initial job interview, and that was, Victoria, you're not Native. How are you going to work with Native elders? And I said, well, I think basically not saying anything and listening is the best strategy to adopt. And I might know a lot about nutrition science, because that's my background, but I certainly don't know a thimbleful of information about indigenous foods. And I think by adopting that personal philosophy of listening, I've learned a tremendous amount. And I know Liz Ann asked about traditional food preservation methods, and some of that, much of that is held very, very close to the heart in terms of people sharing that information. And so I've always felt it a great blessing personally when I've been able to stand near tribal elders and be working with food and hear about what some of those preservation methods were. And it's a tremendous blessing to have that as a non-Native person for me to be able to participate in that. So again, you know, all of you, especially those of you who are serving as extension agents, you have amazing education in adult learning and, you know, how to approach the community, and just keeping that all in mind and then getting yourself out of the way as much as possible in the process is probably the best thing to do. So that would be what my advice would be, I think.
Well, Nora, this is Dan Fagerly up in Colville Indian Reservation as the Tribal Extension Liaison. And having worked in this kind of realm for a lot of years, one of the things we did to initiate, to answer Clea's, was to start a branch office at the tribal headquarters. And eventually that grew into being the only tribal extension office in the state of Washington with its own director, Linda McLean. And we've been, a lot of that because of tribal needs and interest in trying to, I've worked a lot with the Intertribal Ag Council all the way back to helping set it up years ago with our tribal elders, Don Peasley and them. And we worked with them, but food sovereignty, we started producing a food sovereignty nutrition calendar. Usually we bring to AT&I and distribute hundreds of copies out to everybody. But this year we can't do it because we're all locked down. But Kayla's got it printed and ready at her office. Kayla Wells, our family nutrition, and she said she's got a couple thousand there. She's got to get out to people. So if anybody wants one, Kayla Wells, she's made a few notes in there. You can get in contact with her for our, we do a yearly foods and nutrition, and we have local native substitutions in that calendar. So that helps a lot too. And then Linda McLean, a tribal member there who runs the office, she's been doing a lot of food sovereignty workshops and producing. They do food preservation, things like that. So I think, it starts out as a trickle, and then the demand and interest is there, and then it grows, and pretty soon it takes a life of its own. And you step back like I did and let them run their own program. And I think that's the answer too. And so, but I appreciate your work. And I know the Intertribal Ag Council has the produced or made in Indian country or made in by American Indian trademark. So any of your producers you work with, you can actually, they have a branded trademark that actually they can help in marketing and everything else too. So they're a great resource. So anyway, just wanted to add that, keep up the good work. I know food sovereignty is a huge thing. And like I said, we've been producing that calendar and that before it was popular, but it's popular now and growing a lot. This COVID-19 really, I was just on a call with tribal members from down in Nevada and all over the Western United States. And they said the COVID-19 really hit home that we need to really put effort into food sovereignty because distribution systems collapsed and everything else. And people were short on food. And, they said, we've been producing our own through subsistence or other ones for millennial time memoriam. So we need to get back to where we can be a little more self-sufficient, maybe provide for others in our communities too. So thank you and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dan. I think I've seen you at AT&I, if I remember correctly.
We've seen each other. Yeah.
I love that calendar, by the way. And I think the connection was made to Linda and Kayla when I was on this call back in June, and we were able to supply some of their work with some of the COVID-19 funds that we had to support some food distribution, food access, or food sovereignty work. And so they took, they were able to take advantage of that. So that made me happy Yes, I think that's awesome. I love when things start taking a life of their own. And I keep hearing that over and over about, you know, this work has been going on for a long time, but now we're just seeing it really, you know, flourish. And also, I want to echo that I agree with you. Things that we keep hearing throughout the Northwest is from COVID-19 is now it's even more important to really focus in on those local and regional food systems. And for tribal communities, that means like the local, regional, intertribal food system. What were those original trade routes like? Bringing those back even across Indian country. And if you ever have an opportunity to invite Buck Jones from the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, he has a really amazing presentation on just that, just the trade routes and what historically it looked like throughout, you know, the region. Celilo being that made trading hub. It's just a really cool presentation, and to think of how can we reestablish that. It's very nice. It's very cool.
I see that someone asked if anyone at WSU Extension is currently working with the Northwest Indian College. And that is our land grant counterpart in the state, the 1994 tribal land grant. I know that Clea and I worked with Valerie Segrest in the past when she was affiliated with the Northwest Indian College, but I'm curious if anyone else on the call is working with anyone from there, or if maybe someone on the call is from the Northwest Indian College.
I worked on a couple projects with them up there with Sonny and them. And then anyway, but our focus there was to identify the invasive non-native species that are threatening the native foods. And so that was what projects we worked on there. And then the latest one was the Asian giant hornet threatening honeybees and things like that. So we developed some outreach and publicity because it's out in their food gathering places. It could be something they stumbled on. So we wanted to produce materials for their membership. So we complete.
And this is Diane from Skagit. We went out to the Swinomish location for the college, and we did just what you did, Dan, which was to pull berry weeds, the blackberries that were growing wild, because they're creating another garden bed at one side of the college campus. Kate Smith is the person who's really working with this group. But it was, I have to admit, it was great fun to be able to go out and pull berries, or the roots of the berries. I got my workout.
That is hard work. Thank you, Dan.
I just was going to add, when we did have the REEU internship, the research and extension experiences for undergrads, we did some specific reach out to the American Indian College as well. But we didn't have that. Another thing we didn't have this year. So this is a fantastic conversation. I want to thank, just in general, thank everybody and all of the great things going on in the chat. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Jamestown, and I think this is a good time to express gratitude for the programs that we have received through WEAVE. We've been working with Nora, and we're working on a shellfish garden to bring back our traditional foods on a simpler way for our elders to gather. We have a community garden, and we're so grateful for this because it started during COVID. This gave our people an opportunity to get outside, to have physical activity in a safe environment. And now we're moving on to preserving foods. And we still have to figure out how that's going to work, if it's going to be video. We do have a checkout system now. We have some equipment that we've been able to purchase, canners, smokers, dehydrators. It's just, I cannot say enough for this opportunity for receiving these funds. So we're so grateful. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, anyone else involved.
Yes, thank you for applying. We were so excited to be able to fund that you're adding, not just adding to your traditional foods program, but a shellfish garden. Like that's so, it's just so exciting. Oftentimes we do a lot of work with produce, but not often do we get to see some of the aquaculture stuff come through. So we were really excited about when you guys are moving into that.
Oh, good. We'll see how it goes. We're starting that up next month, getting the seed and identifying the area and getting the people who are going to be involved. So yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's helpful for others. I'm sure the extension agents in here can relate to the struggle of trying to do some of these preservation classes virtually. I don't know if anyone has any words of advice, if that's something you've done or are looking to do.
I was going to ask Lizanne if she's jumped off that cliff yet. Lizanne, have you started to offer any of your volunteer training virtually yet?
Well, one of our challenges is we can't even get into our office to go into our kitchen. So we would like to, though. So I'd be happy to have a conversation. I did partner with, out of the Puyallup area, one of, I don't know off the top of my head who it was. And so they actually did a piece in their kitchen, and I did my part from distance. So there are opportunities for that. So I'd be happy to follow up, especially with your shellfish garden, and yeah, I'd be happy to help. But we have not pre-recorded a lot of things yet.
And Lizanne, you might know, but I think Kayla was planning something too coming up. Kayla, she usually does salmon preservation or some other things too. So if there is, I'll have her get.
So.
No, she had to log off. She had to take off.
Okay.
She had a director's call that started or something happening. So she had to get off. So anyway.
But be happy to have a conversation. I'll put my contact in the chat box again.
Great, thanks, Lizanne.
Just I put it in the chat just for anyone who's interested. So I'm the chair of the Oregon Community Food Systems Network, and we most recently had our annual convening virtually, of course. But part of that was some food charter presentations, because Oregon's looking, this network is looking to do more of a food charter model, which I would kind of wish, and I know Laura, you know, Lauren Gwynn, who would be able to much more eloquently describe the food charter process. But right now, we're really taking in the information and visions from our different communities within Oregon. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, you know, BIPOC is a term that's used often, but really all of our various segments within Oregon, and what is the vision for Oregon's food system. And when I went to Oregon Community Food System Network back in 2017, I want to say, I was there to do just a presentation at their convening. And I have to say, when I walked in, what I saw, it just felt very not inclusive of all of the different populations within Oregon. And so that was one of the things that I brought up, and they said, you're absolutely right. And then my perspective was just, you know, I was just bringing in the tribal perspective that if we're going to have conversations about the food system, you cannot leave out our tribal communities. They've been managing these resources in this land since time immemorial. Dan said it earlier. So if we want to envision a healthier food system, a more thriving, more resilient, I think we do have to look towards Indigenous ways of knowing and have tribal input. So most recently we did food charter presentations, and that's where Buck Jones got to share his presentation on the different trading routes. And I put that link into the chat. There's also a ton of other presentations. We did it over a span of 2 days from all different kinds of folks with different backgrounds, with farms who are immigrant farmers, all some awesome presentations. So I highly recommend going through and watching some of those if you're interested.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks for that perspective as well. I know that we have really struggled even at WSU. I know Lauren was really instrumental in the small farms team at OSU and helping support that network get started in Oregon. And, you know, we inherited a team as well that wasn't very inclusive, you know, and you know, we've tried to work to build that. But this hub space has been a space that has been kind of open source. Anyone can come in, and it's been interesting for us because we were initially looking at that Oregon model as a potential model to move towards. And yeah, I just thank you for sharing that perspective as well. I know I've talked to Lauren about it as well too. So it's nice to hear that it's moved in a different direction from when you presented a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it is the same thing. There's folks in there that definitely worked with their tribal communities and were very involved. But my question was, well, why aren't the tribes here then?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you here? Just
exactly.
representing the tribe? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, but with all that said, I love what OCFSN is turning into. Our leadership is very diverse. Our leadership team is very diverse. And I love this food system hub model as well. And I really appreciate the opportunity that to come and present. And I have to say, I've gained so many more connections and partnerships just through this hub system. So thank you very much, Laura and Nicole, for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. It's just a pleasure to have you here. I see that Lizzie Ann also mentioned that she's been working with the coordinated tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation and Yakima, the Peacekeeper Society, and that they're also a great resource.
I actually have, they're trained as master food preservers, several members from each of those groups. So they're also a great resource for that we could partner up pretty well.
That's great.
I see a question from Chris. Hi, Chris.
Yes.
I was like, oh yeah, he emailed me the other day. Better get back to him. Yeah, so I did. I posted the Native American Agriculture Fund Reimagining Native Food Economies report. And he's wondering if I can talk more about that. And I really wish Valerie was on here because she would be able to really give a beautiful explanation of that. So they have a wonderful team of lawyers that worked on this amazing report that's really looking at how we can reimagine our food system. And what it really boils down to is rebuilding that infrastructure. I'm even seeing it throughout the Northwest. Let's just even say with food distribution during COVID-19, like our tribes were being given a lot of donations for food, for their food pantries or their food banks or their food distribution programs. But what unfortunately was happening is they didn't have the infrastructure to get that food. I wouldn't say all of them, but some of them were not able to get that food to their community because they simply didn't have either enough freezer space, enough room at all, or even something to transport it to their community. And so some of the things that are bubbling up is just infrastructure isn't there for tribes to be into this food system or agriculture market per se. So I recommend reading that report, reaching out to Valerie Segrist, which I think most of you know, or at least have heard her name before, because they would be able to speak to it a lot more clearly than I will be able to. But I can touch on what our next steps for moving forward with USDA, federal investment, how can folks support that process? And especially now that Janie Sims-Hip from NAF is on the Biden transition team. And that's timely question, Chris, because we just had our ATNI Presidential Transition Planning Summit with with their transition team last week through ATNI, and Janie was on that call. And as a food sovereignty subcommittee co-chair, Buck and I were able to reiterate some of those things that not only come from that report, but things that are coming out of the NCAI recommendations for USDA, for climate change, for water resources, for land trusts, all these different things. And so some of the top two that we were really talking about here in the Northwest is we wanted to ensure that there was the Tribal Advisory Committee to be created for the USDA immediately, because there's a lot of new provisions under the 2018 Farm Bill that include tribal communities and native agriculture. So we need some sort of tribal leadership coordinating that work and advocating for that. And then also fully implementing all of those provisions within that 2018 Farm Bill that included native agriculture and tribal communities, and actually add resources and funding to those programs. So for example, they're doing a pilot program under section 638 to where tribes can apply for funding so that they can be in charge of their own food procurement for their food distribution program on Indian reservations. And so there was only like 3 things that had to be met in order to do your own food procurement, which was the food you're purchasing must be locally sourced. It has to supplant, not supplement a food. So if you're going to have venison instead of hamburger meat or something, right? So it has to replace it, not just supplement it. And it has to be of equal or higher nutrition. And that's it. And so that really opened the door, or will open the door, for tribes to include culturally relevant foods within these food distribution programs. And so this is kind of like a demonstration pilot project that the USDA is doing, which is awesome. So I'm excited to see that. So really moving some of those things forward. And I was really happy that Janie is on this transition team, because even if we aren't able to articulate everything that's a priority for the Northwest, I know she's extremely well versed in it. So, and her being a prior USDA point person, I know she'll kick down the doors of USDA and, you know, shake it up. So anyone who knows Janie, you know what she's all about. But yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I appreciate your questions.
I feel like we need to have Valerie on just to give an overview of the report, because it is so fascinating, and I think it would be really helpful for everyone.
Yes, I highly recommend that.
And it's beautiful too. It's not only like great to read, but it was just beautifully done. It was inspiring to see as we're all moving more towards, you know, visual media and work that we're doing anyway. So yeah, it was just a beautiful report.
Yes, and thank you, Nicole, for putting her information into the chat.
She emailed earlier and said she was going to be working on another writing project. She said, "You guys got it."
She's always working on a writing project.
I know.
Always getting published in really pretty magazines.
Awesome.
Love her writing. It's amazing.
Speaking of which, I wanted to just give a shout out to one of your publications. If anyone wants to look it up, Nora has a great publication in the Journal of Agriculture, Food Systems, and Community Development on the Northwest Tribal Food Sovereignty Coalition.
It gives a much more in-depth walkthrough of our process, how we came to be.
Other questions for Victoria or Nora?
I know this is really basic, but I just was jumping back to our live YouTube stream, and there was a comment on that side of things. It's a person that's not in the Zoom room with us, but they were simply asking, what is tribal food sovereignty? And it perhaps was something that you may have skimmed over just at the very beginning of saying what you're doing, but maybe we could end the presentation with a very, layman explanation of what that is.
Right. Well, that's good feedback, because I didn't even think of taking a step back and even defining what that is. I just jump in.
This venue is that we have folks that are so embedded in the work or connected as partners, but it's also being introduced to others sometimes for the first time. So yeah.
It's a good reminder that sometimes when you take a step back, start from 3,000 foot level. Yeah, so tribal food sovereignty, just like any tribal sovereignty, can be defined very differently depending on the community you're talking to. So like the food sovereignty in Jamestown definition might look a lot different than what my tribe's definition of food sovereignty is. But I think there's an common theme. And food sovereignty really is about a community that could be tribal or otherwise, right? That has control of their food and how they feed their people, and having the resources and the means to choose what foods they are able to grow or cultivate, hunt, gather, fish, and have the ability to really practice that sovereignty, to make those decisions for their community in order to feed their people. And it can get very political, because not every tribe that we work with in our Northwest region are on reservations. Some don't have reservation land, and they actually live more on trust land, or they have to buy land back, and they don't have fishing rights, or they don't have hunting rights. And so in order for them to practice their culture and feed their family, they have to abide by Washington state regulations of getting their licenses and hunting tags, right? And so they don't have those rights in some of our communities. And so that's what we're talking about. How can tribes have more sovereignty over their food and the land that they live on? I hope that helps. It can get you can get very into the weeds with it, but at the high level, it's how can a community feed its people in a way that's culturally relevant? Yeah.
Thanks, Nora.
Thank you so much, Victoria and Nora, for all of your time this morning and the time that you put into putting these presentations together. We're really excited to have this resource available as a YouTube video that people can go back to and watch as well. So again, thank you so much for being here. We're still open. The call is still open for a few more minutes. So if people want to bring up any other topic areas, you can still ask Victoria and Nora questions while they're here. Anything else that we want to talk about as we move into the new year in terms of content, any other programs that are going on, announcements that people have?
This is Lizanne, and I just to add on to that, there is interest in the food science department. Garish is our food science chair, and I know OSU as well, to help support and maybe come up with research ways for traditional and native foods to make sure, just from a safety standpoint, for example, elderberries, they found pHs vary. So I know our Yakima tribe process a lot of elderberries for longhouse foods. So we're there. We want to be respectful in how we partner, and we don't want to go in and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And but to maybe validate some of the traditional processes, help with that. I know OSU Food Science and WSU Food Science, and I'm guessing University of Idaho, if we asked as well, would be interested in being support or involved in a way that would be helpful for that. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, to follow up on that, Lizanne, too, I know the Kalispel tribe, too, were interested in getting some nutritional analysis, and we tried lining up with Garish, but the big problem is they have the capability to do nutritional analysis, and especially, like you mentioned, Nora, about the 638, where you have to show it's as nutritional or more, and that would be a good avenue, but he has the capability to do it. He has grad students working there, but if you can build some funding into your proposal to pay for that nutritional analysis, then it makes it go a lot faster, because we've been waiting for 1.5 years or so to try finding funds now for the Kalispel tribes to get some nutritional analysis on their cultural foods. And so if you're just a heads up, if you're going to do a project or go towards the 638 food substitutions, build something in there for funds right into the project for paying for nutritional analysis to prove that it's as nutritional or more so. I know Alaska's done a lot of nutritional foods for cultural nutritional analysis, but we haven't done a lot down here. So there's a wide open arena to get a lot done. And it does vary from tribe to tribe, depending on their soil types and nutritional conditions it's grown under for the plants and everything, and even the wildlife, and what they're consuming makes a difference in their nutritional quality. So anyway, that's just a heads up.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and I think I absolutely think that it's a great idea to do the nutrition analysis. Nora and I have talked about this a lot, and it's the intersection of things like where Western science meets Indigenous science. And so looking at things like, from my personal background, having worked in trauma care at a hospital, looking at how would one take care of someone with COVID-19 if they have a cytokine storm from a nutrition perspective, but are there traditional foods that could help support that? And so I am 100% behind that. And the other thing that I am 100% behind is what I put in the chat box, and that is doing your darndest in university settings to recruit Native students to major in foods and nutrition. And I know there are like a bazillion things people can major in, and there are only so many students to go around, which is a problem. But in order to be really effective in this area, we need professionals like Nora to be able to really take the best that there is of Western and Indigenous science, blend it together, and come out with something that's really good to address health inequalities. And so each has strengths, and each can be additive, but we really, really, really need people to be trained to do the work. So when the Kalispel tribe asks for nutrients analysis at WSU in the foods labs and the food science program, that there would be a Native graduate student who could assist with that and preserve that knowledge, yet also, then perhaps sharing it with a Native nutrition student who could take that knowledge, meld it with what they've learned about the best of Western science, and put the two together for the health of the people, because that's what we're really all about, is coming up with the best practices to have healthy people and utilizing the best of all the science that's available, and building not just upon the Western science base that says here's what nutrient needs are, but also what does the Indigenous foods have to offer, and how does that all blend together to come up with a really rich tapestry of what's best for nutritional needs for American and Alaska Native people.
I am so glad we recorded that, Victoria, because I'm going to play it back for our dean.
Well, if you need me as an alumni to come and, apply some subtle pressure or something, I'm always willing to do that. You know, I have to say that there was a time when I didn't embrace my WSU roots as much as I might have, but as I get older, it's become more and more important to me. And it's also, as I've worked with tribal communities, more and more important to me to ensure that I'm not the face of the Tribal Epidemiology Center in the future. I want someone from our region who's a Native person to be the face of the epicenter and to be doing the level of work that I've been so fortunate to be asked to do for the tribes in the Northwest. And so in order to do that, we really need Native students to be trained across the board. And it's not just to become physicians and nurses and those types of medical providers, although that is uniquely important as well. It's in all areas across the spectrum of majors where we need strong Indigenous scientists to lead the charge, because there's a lot of really rich brain power out there.
Thank you again, Victoria. And Nora, it's just such a pleasure to have you here. And I know that we're going to have future hub meetings with both of you and really expand on these topics. And I would love to have Michelle back, and we'll definitely need to have Valerie on as well to really give us the highlights of the NAAF report that recently came out. And just thank you to everyone who's been so willing to participate in these Friday calls, and that you've forwarded on these announcements to those in your networks that you know would be interested. And I like what Nora said. I feel like COVID has really brought many of us together that were working maybe in the periphery of each other's work before, but have really been able to create some connection, even though we haven't been able to be together physically. So thank you all so much for the time and commitment that you have to supporting the food system for all throughout the Pacific Northwest. We have an exciting hub call next Friday. So we are planning on doing a hub brunch. So make sure that you can find your craziest holiday virtual background, put on your ugliest holiday sweater, set up your Zoom space with some tasty brunch. We're not encouraging anyone to drink alcohol at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. But if you're not at work, go ahead and have a mimosa during our call. And we're just excited to really just try to put an end to 2020. It's our last hub call of the year as we move into 2021. So please join us for a fun social hub call, really focused on just moving through the holidays, supporting one another, sharing stories, and hopefully sharing some good cheer as well. Continue to send us updates, check the calendar of events. Let us know if you have hub speaker ideas. And again, thank you all so much for participating.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah,